There is a moment in almost every relationship that nobody recognizes while it's happening because nothing appears broken. The routine still exists. The familiar voice still fills the room. The shared history hasn't disappeared. If someone looked from the outside, they would assume everything was intact. Yet beneath all of it, something invisible has already shifted. It doesn't begin when they leave. It doesn't begin when someone else appears. It begins much earlier, when your presence stops creating emotion and starts becoming part of the background. Human attention has a cruel habit. It slowly stops noticing what never seems capable of disappearing. That's why the end of a relationship rarely feels sudden to the person who leaves. They have been emotionally walking away long before their body ever follows. Most people believe they were replaced because someone else was better, more attractive, more intelligent, more exciting. That explanation is comforting because it gives the pain a shape. It creates a visible enemy. But the mind rarely abandons emotional familiarity simply because perfection arrives. People don't always search for someone better. They search for someone who makes them feel something different. Novelty doesn't defeat love because it is superior. It defeats love because the brain constantly adapts to emotional certainty. The extraordinary eventually becomes ordinary when it never changes. What once felt impossible slowly becomes expected, and expectation quietly removes appreciation without announcing that it has done so. This is the part almost nobody wants to admit because it feels deeply unfair. The more consistently you became available, the less your presence demanded emotional attention. Every act of kindness slowly transformed from surprise into routine. Every sacrifice became invisible after being repeated enough times. Every reassurance lost emotional weight because it was guaranteed. You weren't becoming less valuable as a person. You were becoming more predictable as an emotional experience. The human brain is astonishingly efficient at conserving attention. Anything that appears permanent slowly receives less of it, not because it lacks importance, but because it no longer feels uncertain. Uncertainty has always carried a strange psychological power. It forces the mind to stay awake. It creates anticipation before there is pleasure. It makes small moments feel larger because the outcome isn't guaranteed. This is why people often remember the beginning of relationships with painful clarity. Every conversation mattered. Every glance carried possibility. Every silence meant something. The future was unknown, so the mind invested enormous emotional energy into every interaction. Once certainty replaced curiosity, the emotional intensity naturally declined. Most people mistake this decline for the disappearance of love, when in reality it is often the disappearance of psychological tension. That tension isn't created through games or manipulation. It exists because the unknown has always been one of the strongest emotional forces inside the human mind. The brain constantly predicts what will happen next. When those predictions become effortless, attention quietly drifts elsewhere. Familiarity creates comfort, but comfort also lowers emotional alertness. This is why people often wake up one day convinced something has changed, even though nothing dramatic ever happened. Nothing collapsed overnight. The emotional landscape simply became too familiar to notice. Then someone new enters their life. Not necessarily someone extraordinary. Not someone destined to become the love of their life. Just someone untouched by routine. Someone whose reactions haven't been memorized. Someone whose personality still contains unanswered questions. Suddenly the brain experiences something it hasn't felt in months or even years. Curiosity returns. Attention sharpens. Tiny interactions create disproportionate excitement because uncertainty has returned to the equation. The feelings appear stronger, but what has actually become stronger is psychological engagement. From your perspective, this feels impossible to understand. You shared years together. You carried memories that nobody else could replace. You believed history itself was protection. But history has a hidden weakness. The longer it grows, the easier it becomes to assume it will always remain. People begin investing more energy into preserving the relationship than into experiencing it. Days become routines. Conversations become habits. Affection becomes expected instead of noticed. Nothing terrible happens, yet something essential quietly disappears. The relationship survives while the emotional awareness inside it slowly fades. That is why being replaced feels like betrayal at first, but confusion soon follows. You replay every memory searching for the exact mistake. You wonder which conversation ruined everything. Which argument pushed them away? Which decision destroyed what once felt permanent? But the answer rarely hides inside one catastrophic event. Emotional distance is usually built from hundreds of unnoticed moments that never seemed important while they were happening. Tiny assumptions accumulate until they quietly redefine how two people experience each other. The tragedy is that both people often contribute without realizing it. One stops expressing appreciation because they believe love no longer requires it. The other keeps giving because they believe consistency guarantees security. Both believe stability is enough. Neither notices that emotional attention is quietly disappearing beneath the comfort they worked so hard to build. Love doesn't usually collapse under enormous pressure. More often, it slowly dissolves beneath the weight of ordinary days that nobody thought needed protecting. Then comes the day you discover they found someone else. Your first instinct is to compare yourself. You search for visible differences because visible differences feel easier to accept than invisible psychology. You examine appearance, personality, confidence, humor, ambition, charm. Surely there must be something they possess that you never had. Yet comparison almost never brings peace because the answer refuses to stay logical. Sometimes the other person seems objectively less attractive, less accomplished, less emotionally mature. That contradiction becomes unbearable because it destroys the comforting belief that life rewards merit. Suddenly you are forced to confront something much darker. Human emotion does not always follow fairness. People are rarely pulled only toward better experiences. They are often pulled toward different experiences. Difference interrupts emotional adaptation. Difference creates fresh anticipation. Difference allows the imagination to fill empty spaces with possibility. The unknown often appears brighter than reality because the mind naturally completes unfinished pictures with optimism. Someone new hasn't yet accumulated disappointments, misunderstandings, ordinary mornings, repetitive routines, or familiar imperfections. They still exist inside imagination as much as reality. That illusion carries extraordinary emotional force. Looking back, you begin remembering moments that felt insignificant then but feel devastating now. The conversations became shorter. Their laughter arrived less often. Their attention wandered more easily. Their excitement disappeared from ordinary moments you once shared effortlessly. None of these signs felt powerful enough to predict an ending. Yet together they formed a quiet emotional withdrawal that neither of you fully understood while living through it. Perhaps the hardest realization is discovering that people rarely announce the moment they emotionally detach because they often cannot identify it themselves. The process is gradual. They simply stop feeling pulled toward you with the same intensity. They stop wondering about you because they believe they already know every answer. Curiosity quietly dies beneath certainty. Desire slowly weakens beneath predictability. Emotional investment fades without hatred, without dramatic conflict, and sometimes even without intention. And when they finally leave, it feels as though they abandoned years in a single decision. But from inside their experience, those years had already been fading long before the goodbye ever arrived. The ending wasn't created in one moment. It was revealed in one moment. The real ending had been unfolding silently, hidden beneath ordinary days that both of you believed would last forever. The cruelest part of being replaced is not watching someone choose another person. It is realizing that while you were trying to preserve what you had, they were already becoming emotionally available to a future that did not include you. That realization attacks more than your heart. It attacks your memory. Suddenly every happy moment becomes suspicious. Every promise sounds different. Every expression of affection feels as though it contained an ending you were never able to hear. The mind begins rewriting the past because it cannot accept that something which once felt so alive could disappear without a clear explanation. It searches for hidden meanings, overlooked warnings, and invisible fractures, hoping that if it can locate the exact point where everything changed, the pain will finally make sense. Most of the time, it never finds that moment, because there wasn't one. There were hundreds of tiny shifts, each too small to notice, until together they became impossible to reverse. What makes this experience so devastating is that love trains us to believe consistency creates permanence. We assume that showing up every day, remaining loyal, and choosing the same person over and over again should be enough to protect what we've built. Yet the human mind does not experience emotions as a photograph frozen in time. It experiences them as movement. Feelings either deepen, evolve, or slowly lose their intensity through adaptation. That is why two people can honestly say they still care for each other while no longer feeling emotionally connected. Nothing dramatic has happened. The relationship simply stopped creating the emotional tension that once made every shared moment feel significant. Ironically, the person they found after you is rarely carrying a lighter emotional burden. They are simply arriving before familiarity has had the chance to do its quiet work. They meet the version of your partner that is still curious, still attentive, still willing to notice the smallest details because everything feels new again. They inherit the excitement that naturally belongs to beginnings, just as you once did. But beginnings have an expiration date that nobody notices while they are living inside them. Eventually, certainty returns. Routines develop. Predictions become effortless. The same psychological forces that slowly erased your mystery begin surrounding them as well. The cycle does not spare anyone simply because the faces have changed. This is why the person who replaced you can appear unbelievably happy in the beginning. From the outside, it looks like proof that you were the problem all along. But appearances rarely reveal the psychology beneath them. Every relationship begins with unanswered questions. Every relationship eventually answers them. What feels extraordinary at first slowly becomes familiar, and familiarity asks every couple the same silent question: can emotional awareness survive once mystery is gone? Most people never realize that this is the real challenge. They spend years protecting the relationship while forgetting to protect the attention that keeps it emotionally alive. Perhaps that is the most unsettling realization of all. You were never replaced because your entire existence became worthless. You were replaced because another story had not yet become predictable. That truth hurts because it strips away the comforting belief that love alone guarantees permanence. It forces you to confront a darker reality about human nature. People often confuse the return of uncertainty with the return of passion, even when they are simply experiencing the emotional chemistry of a beginning they have lived through before. Years from now, they may remember you in a way they never expected. Not because they suddenly discovered your value after losing you, but because distance has a strange effect on memory. Once daily familiarity disappears, the mind stops focusing on repetition and starts preserving emotional highlights instead. The ordinary moments that once felt invisible become impossible to recreate. The comfort that seemed effortless becomes something they quietly miss. By then, however, memory is no longer a second chance. It is simply evidence that people often understand the weight of a presence only after it no longer belongs to their everyday life. And perhaps that is why the words, "they found someone else," cut so deeply. They sound like a verdict on your worth, when in reality they reveal something far more unsettling about the way people experience familiarity, attention, and desire. Sometimes the deepest wound is not losing the person. It is discovering that the place you believed was permanent existed only as long as it continued to awaken something inside them. Because in the end, people rarely leave all at once. They leave in pieces. First their curiosity, then their attention, then the quiet excitement they once felt simply by being near you. By the time their footsteps finally disappear, the real goodbye has already happened countless ordinary days before. And that is why the silence left behind feels so impossibly heavy. It is carrying the weight of an ending that began long before anyone realized it had already started.